How's it going, everyone? Welcome to my video, and more importantly, welcome back to my channel. It is good to be making consistent videos again, although I have been doing some live streams here and there, and I also recently started doing shorts as well. So I do hope to do some more videos in the near future and to grow the subscriber count. But yeah, Norway Chess 2025 is upon us. Norway Chess is one of the flagship events on the chess calendar, featuring a lot of the strongest players in the world. It doesn't really have any World Championship cycle implications or anything like that, unless there's like rating points, I guess, but it's not on the circuit. It's just an event that goes on, which is good. You know, they have a good prize fund for both the men's and the women's section as well. And yeah, this is also one of the strongest tournaments on the calendar. This year's edition, I believe all 6 players are in the top 9, which is absolutely crazy. You have one of, arguably the chess GOAT, Magnus Carlsen, World Champion Gukesh, Hikaru, Fabiano, Arjun Geisy, who's a rising star, and Wei Yi, who was a rising star and then kind of disappeared, and now he's back to a consistent top 10 player. So really good storylines all the way through. And before I go into it, the format of the Norway Chess is, I think it's 2 hours. Well, yeah, it says there, 2 hours, 2 hours per side. There's no increment till move 40, and I think from move 40 on, in the classical games, there's like 10-second increment, I want to say. And if the games are a draw, which is pretty common in top-level chess, if it's a draw, then they do an Armageddon. And you essentially get more points if you win the classical versus the Armageddon. Like, I believe you get, I don't know, it's like 3 points if you win the classical, 1.5 if you win the Armageddon. And if you lose the classical, it's 0. But if you lose the Armageddon, like you draw the classical but lose the Armageddon, I guess it's half, or is it 1? I'm not exactly sure, but I'll make sure there's something. So round 1 pairings were Wei Yi versus Arjun Geisy. I'm not going to cover that in this video, but I did make a short, so feel free to check that out. Then we have Hikaru Nakamura versus Fabiano Caruana, a classical American matchup. And then we have Magnus Carlsen versus Gukesh, the long-awaited current world champion versus over 10-year world champion and one of the greatest chess players of all time. Clearly a very highly anticipated matchup, and that's what you're going to get from Norway Chess. Every single matchup is going to be high level in some realm. So we are going to be taking a look first at this game, Hikaru Nakamura as black versus Fabiano Caruana as white. And the opening is not really that important, although I will credit Gotham Chess, because I watched his recap kind of in preparation for this, which is that Hikaru had not played the Slav, besides some candidates tournament recently. This was his first time in like a decade that he's played the Slav. I think he normally plays like Queen's Gambit Declines and some like Indian defenses and things like that. So the Slav, very rare for Hikaru. That said, I do think the Slav is a very solid weapon against d4. People oftentimes ask me, what do you do against d4? I had a friend recently rant how he hated the Queen's Gambit Declined. Jonas, if you're watching, shout out. And I did recommend the Slav because I think you can get some very solid positions with like knight f6, e6, then takes, and b5, not b6. Well, there could be b6, but you see what I'm saying. So I would definitely look into the Slav if you are looking for a defense to d4. That said, Fabiano also thought it was pretty dangerous and decided to just play exchange Slav and just develop the pieces. And as Hikaru literally said in his, not press conference, but the confessional, he was bored. So I'm not really going to get into the opening. It was very boring. Just some maneuvering, some trades. You'll see that white sort of planted a knight on c5 and then doubled on the c file. Eventually, rook c2, rook c1, and then a mass trade occurred, including that of the queens. All right, so this is sort of the endgame we have, which, if you look at the eval and everything like that, I was just checking to make sure it's on, but yes, if you look at the eval and everything like that, it's going to say it's a draw. It says 0.0s, maybe that black is slightly better, but it is worth noting on a practical level that black is the one who would be pressing slightly, because you have a situation of 2 knights versus bishop and knight. Now, normally, I'd say on the average chess position, you'd rather have a bishop than a knight. But as I always say, context is key. And in this particular position, this bishop sucks. The bishop cannot go to e4, f5, obviously. The squares are taken. For the moment, you can't go to d3 or c2, and c2 wouldn't even be that good. And if you could get to d3, you're not really getting anywhere. And also, these pawns are doing a very good job of, like, blockading the potential squares that the bishop could go to. So I would definitely keep an eye out on this imbalance of, like, the bishop versus the knight. So Fabi played knight d6, Hikaru played knight c3, so they did a little bit more shuffling. Hikaru putting the pawn on f5, really shutting out the bishop on e4, f3, g5, and so some more maneuvering happened. Won't get into all the details necessarily. Actually, I think I can go on quite a bit more before the kind of dramatic thing happens. Fabi's happy to trade the bishop. If, you know, knight takes, then he would just play knight takes, and as I mentioned earlier, the bishop's not that good, so this knight versus knight would be a pretty easy draw. So just some shuffling happened, and a few moves later, it's been several moves. This is move 60 already, by the way. We're probably only like 2-3 minutes into the video. Actually, I don't know. I guess we are, I don't know where to say it. Oh, 6 minutes into the video. 5, 6, depending on how I do editing. But we're on move 60 or 61 as far as this game goes, and nothing dramatic has happened until knight a4. Finally, Fabiano cracks. Now, I do think it is important as a spectator to remember that these players don't have the eval bar with them when they're playing. So as spectators, we probably just see, oh, it's 0.0, it's drawn. These players are probably thinking in terms of, like, Hikaru's slightly better, Fabiano thinks he can hold the draw but is trying to sort of, like, grovel for it and things like that, and knight a4 is kind of where he cracks. Also, another point of context I forgot to mention earlier, but you could kind of see, is that Fabiano was on his heels as far as the time went. If you go earlier, I believe, he had a deficit as much as 30 minutes versus 44 seconds. Now, in case you're wondering, oh, how didn't Fabiano run out of time? Well, there's an increment. After move 40, they got what I believe is a 10-second increment. So, essentially, so Fabiano was just blitzing out his moves, and eventually, you know, it is, again, it should be a drawn endgame, but he kind of cracked with this move knight a4. Now, why is a knight a4 a mistake? It's actually very instructive, because white has some weaknesses. After knight e4, knight e4 is sort of the, you know, if I can say it, winning move for Hikaru. You're attacking the g-pawn, which forces white to take the knight, but then after f takes, you are able to put your other knight into f5 and then protect the pawns. Not protect the pawns, sorry, you're able to attack the pawns. Now you might be thinking, oh, well, after knight f5, I can just go king f2 and I'm protecting both pawns. So what? Well, after the move king b6, white is in what is called a zugzwang. If you don't know what a zugzwang is, the official definition of a zugzwang is any chess position where any move you make is going to hurt your position, which is a little contrary to what you would think in most chess positions. It's advantageous to have the move, but in a position like this, you actually don't really want to have the move. The reason is this knight is doing a good job at sort of blockading the b5 square, so the king is unable to go in because of the knight. However, if the knight moves, then the king gets into the b5 square, b5, b4, and then is able to take the pawn. And what other moves could you try? You can't move a pawn. All of these pawns are blocked, and obviously if you move this guy, then the pawn gets taken. And if the king moves, then you lose sight of one of the pawns. This king is kind of stuck protecting these pawns. So white is in a very classic endgame zugzwang. He tries to play knight a4, but after king b5, the king is suddenly getting in, and now you have a similar position after knight c5, king b4, to where once again it might look like, oh, they're kind of glued together, the knight found a nice home on c5, protecting the b3 pawn, but once again, zugzwang, what are you going to do? Now you physically can't move a pawn, not that would really make a difference, but you physically are unable to move a pawn. If you move a king, you lose a pawn, and if this knight moves, then you lose this pawn. So for those reasons, black is winning. He's able to take the pawn, and Fabi is able to recapture, but now you go king c3, you're going to go king to d3 and go after the e3 pawn, which white is really unable to defend. White's best chance was to try to sort of, like, I guess, counterattack this pawn, but he took and then check, and after knight c5, black played knight f5. Now this pawn is under fire. Then after king to d2, Fabiano resigned because quite simply you roll out the red carpet for the pawn. The pawn is just going to be able to make a queen, and it is game over. So that was really instructive. A very very grindy endgame by Hikaru. He had the two knights. I can probably just go to any position. He had the two knights versus the bishop and the knight, which was slightly advantageous for him. But the problem, I think, for Fabiano was he was down on the clock, and when he had to be super precise, he wasn't for a move and ended up losing. I think another instructive point, if I can see, I actually don't remember, but yeah, Hikaru took his time. Now, he had 9 minutes left here, so he doesn't exactly have the time luxury he had earlier, but it is important. If you're Hikaru, he probably sensed that he was winning. He probably realized that this pawn is weak and that, all the variations, but okay, he took, I guess that's 2.5 minutes, which is not bad. So that's just an instructive point to where if you have way more time than your opponent, you can still think, because odds are your opponent messed up. You don't have to make a move quickly so that they'll hopefully run out of time. Especially at that level, Fabiano's not just going to let his flag fall, right? So that was a very instructive game. And now to the game we've all been waiting for. Magnus Carlsen, 5-time, I think I've just heard that, 5-time world champion, Magnus Carlsen. He's won it 5 times, right? 2 against Vichy, 1 against Karyakin, and then 2 against Nepo, right? No, 1 against Fabi, and then 1 against Nepo. Because Nepo's played 2 world championships, so one of them was against Ding. So he didn't beat Nepo twice. So 5-time world champion Magnus Carlsen versus defending world champion from India, Gukesh. This opening was actually a little bit crazy because after d4, knight f6, most people, especially at this high level, would just play c4, knight c3, knight f3, something like that. Occasionally, at some levels, you might get a London or something like that. But Magnus plays knight c3, which is already very interesting because you are blocking the c pawn. This is called a Jobava London. And the idea, if you get unlimited moves, you're just trying to play e4, bishop f4, and just accelerate your development. So Gukesh plays d5, which kind of stops e4. And again, with kind of like the previous opening, we're not necessarily going to have a deep dive into it necessarily. But I will note that after bishop e2, bishop takes, Magnus plays the counterintuitive knight c takes e2, rather than taking with the knight or the queen. And the idea being that he can play c3, and you kind of get an interesting version of the London. It's kind of like a London system. You have the bishop here, but the main difference is that what's the knight doing on e2, and then later on g3? If I show you this position, you probably think, oh, this is a London system, but how does knight get here? I guess maybe it went to d2, f1, g3, something like that. So not completely out of the realm of possibility, but was pretty interesting. h6, rook d1, queen a5, some more maneuvering happened. Magnus pushes his h-pawn, so he's not quite yet committed to castling, but maybe he's going to attack on the king side. He has the resources to sort of do so. White plays knight e5, bishop takes e5, knight d7. Some more moves were played. Knight h5, bishop takes, queen takes. And yeah, I think this is kind of a critical moment where Gukesh plays e5, which, I'm never one to criticize a world champion, so I don't want to say it was a mistake, but I do think down the road, the problem is that this pawn can be pretty weak, which you can't really exploit now. Well, if you take the pawn, then, well, obviously you can't recapture because the queen is protecting, but Gukesh was probably going to play this move queen g6 to attack the knight. And if the knight moves to g3, then he was going to play queen e6. And you don't really have a way to sort of protect this pawn further, so he was going to be able to recapture that pawn and then just kind of, play the game from there. Magnus plays queen g3, but what I think long term, I think what this could do is this pawn could be weak because now there's not really a pawn that can protect it, so that is definitely something I would keep in mind. Queen g6, queen takes, pawn takes, knight g3, and some trades happen, and black played the move pawn to c4. All right, so we have this endgame where, again, kind of like the previous game, although I think this one more favors white. Actually, I think we can kind of tell a few more moves once the eval bar, which everyone likes to, kind of stare at during these games, kind of dwindles down. It's getting very close to just saying drawn. Yeah, here it's saying zeros. So the eval bar, the computer is saying like, oh, this is a draw, but you are dealing with one of the, if not the greatest endgame player of all time, Magnus Carlsen. He has a slight advantage because he has a weakness on a5 to be able to attack, and then, once he like moves his king and rook, he can play e4 eventually, and he has a stronger center. And we're going to kind of see that play out throughout this game. So rook e8, just some maneuvering happened. Rook g3, rook f1, and then he swung the rook to a1, and then traded some pieces. And eventually what this all culminated to is a situation where Magnus has 2 passed pawns in the middle versus Gukesh's passed pawns on the side. So this is going to be exciting because the pawns can't really stop each other. It's like, I'm going to do my thing, you're going to do your thing, and may the best man win, right? So the key is, even though by quantity, Gukesh has, they both really, for that matter, have 2 passed pawns, you're really just going to be pushing one of them because you have to like accelerate the process, right? You have to, like, you can't afford to just go like, I'm going to go here, then I'm going to go here. I'm going to have them support each other because then this pawn is going to run home, and, that wouldn't work out well. So as we see in the game, Black played h4, White played e5, attacking the knight, so the knight needs to move first, and then you can start to continue to push, right? No, he sacrifices the knight. The knight hangs, he plays h2 anyway, I don't care. f7, queen, sorry, not queen first. He went rook g3 check, trying to maybe position the king to a spot where it's favorable for him to queen and then get some checks. h1 queen, f8 queen. So what has gone on? It's been a crazy series of moves. Essentially, both sides push their passed pawns to the promotion square. White is up a knight, because remember, Black sacrificed the knight. He ignored the attack on the f6 knight. So White is up a knight, but Black, if he plays very accurately, should be able to draw, because you have a situation where you have the queen and the rook versus this king, and you can play moves like, rook g2 and then get the queen in and things like that. And obviously, you could tell like any 1,000 rated player this. In this position, you have to check. Like, I mean, like I would tell any like maybe beginner, it doesn't really matter. You just have to check, do like a check here, a check, check, something like that. In this position, and the reason that you need to check is because otherwise White is going to check and attack. And even if everything dwindles down, you have an extra knight. So Black played the wrong check. He played queen h6 check, which again, at that level, also time pressure is a factor. Gukesh has like under 30 seconds. Magnus is also approaching that threshold as well. What you need to do is, I'm just kind of putting this on just to, just kind of document it. I'm not really like some expert as to like how to like, secure a draw in these positions, but I think rook g2 is the drawing move. And then the idea being that after king d3, now you can go check. And if you go back, you can continue to check. And if you try to hide and go forward, then you play queen c6 check. And you're actually going to win the knight if you just move the king. And if the queen blocks, well, you have undefended the rook. So you just take. And now you just have an extra rook for a knight, which should be winning for you. So I think that's sort of the idea behind rook g2. Obviously, there are other variations. I'm not going to go through every single one of them. Gukesh plays queen h6, which looks good. This looks like, you're just playing queen g6, and then you're going check. You have a check on the other side. You can get your rook involved. You get the rook involved. You go queen b2. They're connected. But after king a4, Black does not have a check. You can't go check because of the knight. I guess you can go queen a1 check, actually. But queen a1... So actually, I was wrong. Black does have a check. But after king to b4... you just escape. If rook here, you just go king c4. And I think this is the point where Black no longer has a check. So after king a4, it is realized by Gukesh that there is not really much you can do because the king would just hide. So Gukesh, both players low on time. This is very tense game between the past 2 world champions. Has to bite the bullet and just take the knight. And essentially it's like, you know, it's like a duel, as I think Dale Naroditsky said in his commentary. Like, someone's getting mated. It's either white, you know, mating black, or black is going to get in with the rook. You know, like, so if you fail to mate your opponent, then, well, I guess it could be a draw, but it's just really tense all the way through. And Magnus absolutely clutches it up. He plays queen to h8 check, king g6, rook a6, king f5, queen f8, king e4. Now, it looks like with king e4 that he fell for a skewer with queen a8 and takes the rook. However, if Magnus had played queen a8, that actually would have drawn, because black can take, and then when you take the rook, you go queen c4 check, and there's not a way to escape the checks, or you lose your rook. If king a3, you take the rook with check, and that should be an easy draw. In fact, black would be the one with the extra pawn. But if you go king a5, then queen c5. So you really just go back and forth with the queen. So you're not going to skewer. Magnus finds the only move, rook to e6. And it is in this position that Gukesh resigned the game. He resigned the game because whichever way the king goes, you are going to get murdered either way. If king d3, you can play queen f3, followed by rook c6, and you win the queen. If king d5, then you play, I mean, there are a number of wins, but queen f5 wins, king c4, rook c6, and you win the game. So, yeah, very, very interesting game. I thought it was just very exciting because, I mean, just in chess, you never know what's going to happen. And in this game, you had a situation where, you know, both sides had two passed pawns, and they just kind of, they both pushed, and it was supposed to be a draw, but then Gukesh messed up. But as I always say, the players do not have the eval bar on them during their games, and it's just that one side messed up, and the current world champion, Magnus Carlsen, won in the classical portion, which means that the standings will be as follows, which is that, actually I can switch to here. So Magnus and Hikaru are in the lead because they won the classical portion, so they have 3 points each. Arjun is slightly behind at 1.5 because he drew the classical but won the Armageddon, and then Wei Yi has a point because he drew, and then Fabiano and Gukesh are both on 0. Obviously, very early in the tournament, and with all the Armageddons and things like that, you just never know what's going to happen. But what we do know is going to happen tomorrow is Hikaru versus Magnus. For obvious reasons, this is a very intriguing matchup, but as early as round 2, well, this says 3, but it's like, you know, technically round 2. But as early as round 2, you have the two co-leaders facing off. So whoever wins, if there's a classical winner, that player should be in a really good position going into the rest of Norway Chess. Even whoever wins the Armageddon should be in a good position. But there's also the intrigue, which is that, and I'm actually kind of going off script here. Let's see. I guess you can see that fine. Yeah, but note that Hikaru's at 2806, Magnus at 2841, which is about as high as he's gone, but Magnus is world number 1, and Hikaru is world number 2. And if Hikaru can win the classical portion, then he's kind of closing in on the gap. I don't know, like, the math, like, how many he gains if he wins and Magnus would lose, so I wouldn't know the numbers there, but it would be pretty close. Like, already Hikaru is, like, 34, 36. No, 34. No, sorry, 35 points behind Magnus. Sorry, I can't do math, but as it stands right now, in classical chess, Magnus is only 35 points ahead of Hikaru. So if Hikaru wins, he can really close that gap. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this type of content, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to the video, or to the channel, that is. I don't think you can necessarily subscribe to a video, as cool as that would be, but yeah, my plan tentatively is I'm going to try to get multiple shorts out a week. Ideally, I'll get like 1 short out a day, and then, you know, on a normal week, probably 1 to 3 videos a week, but given that's Norway Chess and there are a lot of exciting games, I'm sure there will be more opportunities. So I'm not necessarily committed to doing 1 video for every round there is necessarily, but if there's something interesting, there will be a video out of it for sure. All right, thank you all so much for watching. Have a great Memorial Day to those who observe, and I will see you all for the next video. Bye.